Welcome to the Arabesque Sewing Studio and to video 6 of the tutorial series for the Sewing Space Station. Now in this final video we'll be sewing the cute little PinPod pin cushion. So I'll be running through how to sew this very simple 4-patch pin cushion, how to add these extra seams into the sides, and finally how to add this little dimpling tufting detail that makes the pin cushion really cute. So I'm really excited to demonstrate the little PinPod pin cushion that we have in the pattern, and this is actually really simple. It's just a 4-patch on the top and a 4-patch on the bottom, and then we box the corners and we sew around all of the edges here, and we make it look like it's a tufted boxed cushion like you would see in say a French styled house. And I'd just like to show you the difference here. So this was the first one that I made, and I stuffed it within an inch of its life, and I really like how it looks. I don't know if you can really see here, but this is incredibly firm. But the problem is you can actually barely stick anything in it, like it's so full. And I've got rice in here as well to give it some weight. If I drop it, you can hear like it makes a good thunk. So I tried for this one to not stuff it so full, and you can hear it still plops nicely when you drop it, but it's actually much easier to stick things in because it's not so full. So I'll show you how to just get that balance right, and of course you can stuff yours as full or as not full as you would like. So you're going to need all the pieces from the pattern for the PinPod. So that's a total of 8 pieces of fabric. So I've got 2 of each colour here so that I can sort of do a bit of a mix and match with everything here. You also need 2 pieces of fleece and 2 pieces of interfacing. And this just gives this even a little bit more loft, but the interfacing once again adds that really nice structure that just helps it hold its shape, because we're going to be stressing all of these seams as we sew along them and pulling them really tightly. So the interfacing is just a really nice thing to add to this to help it keep its shape. First step is to lay these out, can't see if that's one layer or not, in a way that you like. And you'll find as you do this, if you have a look at my layout here, when you tip this on the side, you'll be able to see that you'll have the fabrics from the top and the bottom also coordinating together. So you can sort of pay attention to all of that so that you can arrange them in a way that you'd like. So you might not want to have, say, a blue and a blue next to each other. So just think about that as you lay them out. Do a similar design here. I just want to think about how they're going to end up when they are top to bottom, because I don't want any of my fabrics right next to each other. I think that should work quite well. So then we're just going to sew these in pairs. So just take the right hand one and place right sides together on top of the left hand one, and we're going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch down this slightly longer side at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now both of these are sewn into pairs, and I've got these pressed in opposing directions, so that when we put them together they're going to nest. So just flip them right sides together and align those edges. Then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch down each of these seams at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've got both of these sewn together, so just going to give them a press while they're flat, and then open out that seam just give that a press with your fingers to start with, just to get that open so you can get the iron in there, and then give that a good press and flip it over and press it from the front. Then just repeat that with the second 4 patch. Okay, so now we're going to flip them both to the wrong side again and grab your pieces of interfacing. You're going to center that, just move that one out of the way, with the fusible side facing down. So center that within the seam allowance, and without moving it, just going to hold the iron over there, fuse that in place. It over and press it again from the right side. So then you're going to grab one of your pieces of fleece, and with the fusible side down, you're going to place that on top of the interfacing. And then we're going to flip this and press this from the right side. So just without moving it, flip it over, and then just press the iron on top. So don't do a big moving motion, that's potentially going to move your fleece underneath there before it's fused. Just make sure you're doing a nice even press, and then just check that everything here is nicely fused and all of that glue has nicely stuck together. So just repeat that for this second piece here. So now that we've got this fused, you're just going to flip these back the other way. So I've got all my pieces laid out in the same orientation for the top and the bottom. So now you can decide whether you want to place them together this way around, and then you'll have them meeting in this way, or you can flip this and have this meeting in this direction. It's really up to you. So you just place them together the way that you would like to have them, patches lining up, and we're just going to align the raw edges and put a few clips around just to hold those layers together. Now you need to pick one of the longer sides, and we're going to leave this open on one side by about 2 inches or so. So we're going to leave this as an opening when we sew it. We'll just put a clip over it for the time being. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew around all 4 edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving this little section open, and making sure to backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. So now the top and the bottom are stitched together, and we've got an opening in the side here that we're going to turn the pincushion right side out in a minute. But right now we're going to box the corners. So this is a really shallow little pincushion, so we're only going to be doing a really tiny little corner here. And so you're going to measure with your ruler just 3/8 of an inch. On each of the corners here. So if you're not sure what 3/8 of an inch is, you're just going to count for each of these little graduations across your ruler. You're going to count 1, 2, 3. When you get to the third, that is 3/8. And just grab your scissors, and you're just going to very carefully cut this corner out. So you've got to get through a little bit of bulk here, so just be careful as you're doing it. so you don't cut too far. Now my top tip for boxing corners here, and the very next step, is to actually go and sew along all these seams that we've done already and re-stitch them. And the reason we're going to do that is because we've just cut off a good portion of the stitching and we're going to be pulling on that when we open this corner out. So just to avoid any stitching coming undone and opening these corners up, I just recommend you take it back to the machine and you stitch over all of this again. And the other thing this is going to do is just give these seams a bit of extra reinforcing, because we're going to be stuffing this quite full and we're going to be then stressing the seams as we sew those little extra edges in. And so this is just going to mean that you don't get any of that spreading where the stitches start to open up and show a little bit in the seam. So now we're going to box the corners on this. So you just want to reach your fingers in to that hole so that you can separate these layers. We're going to come to one of the corners here and we're just going to open that out like a little mouth and stretch that out and just tug on these edges here a bit lower down away from the corner, just to pull everything out nice and tightly. And then we want to match up these seams, and you can have them going opposite directions if you would like. And just grab a clip and pop that over that end. Then just move on to the next corner. So if you're finding you're having trouble opening it up, just reach inside to separate the layers till you see that little mouth forming. And you're going to tug on that. So you can see why we needed to reinforce our stitches in the previous step. If these were just open stitches, that would all be opening up and unraveling, and we don't want that happening. So just line up those two seams. And work your way around until you've got all four corners open and clipped together like this. What we're going to be doing at the sewing machine is we're going to be stitching across the fleece here, and that's going to mean, if I just measure this 1/4 inch in from this top edge to this bottom edge, the depth of that seam length will now be about 3/4 of an inch. So that will be how deep your pincushion ends up. So I'll just clip this last one. So now we'll take this to the sewing machine and we'll stitch all four of these corners so that we end up with a nice box. Okay, so all of the corners are boxed now. This is all sewn together. We're just going to turn this right side out. So just carefully take your time without stressing that opening too much. Okay, that's looking really cute. So now we're up to the part where we're going to stuff it. So I'm just going to discuss what I like to stuff my pincushions with. So for quite a number of years now, I have been adding a little bit of rice to mine, just because I like my pincushions just to be a bit heavier, so that I don't tend to just accidentally knock them off as I'm trying to put pins in, which is typically what used to happen if I just had polyfill inside. So I like to do a combination of rice and polyfill, and I find the polyfill just gives it that nice puffy look, but the rice just gives it a little bit of extra weight. And of course, if you've got other things that you would like to put inside, you can go right ahead. You can use things like ground walnut shells. That seems to be a fairly popular one. And some people like to use sawdust. Yeah, just do your research and just use what you've got close to you. So I like to put the rice in first, and I use a funnel so that I don't just make a mess. And I've got about 1/3 cup of rice here, so that it's going to give a good amount of weight
without being too much in there. Now I've got this much polyfill, like this is, I don't know, if I squish it all down, I can probably fit it all in my hand, but I'm probably not going to use all of this. I'll just start stuffing with just grabbing a small piece, and just use quite small pieces at a time, and just work your way in to one of the back corners. And the trick here, I'm putting this all above the rice at the moment. The trick here is just to sort of work it. I spread my fingers out as I'm going in so that I can get this nicely evenly dispersed and I don't have any lumps. So now I'm going to push some into the front of the pincushion, into this front corner, and then into this back corner as well. Now I'm going to turn this over so that the rice is mainly on top now, and I'm going to stuff on this side, placing it over this layer of rice, and this is where it starts to fall out a bit. It can get a bit messy, so just take your time. So the aim is that I would like to get a layer of rice roughly in the middle of this. But it won't be exactly in case there. Just do your best to work this in where you want it to be. So pushing it into all of the four corners until you get a nice even shape that doesn't have a lot of lumps in any particular place. So it's a nice smooth shape. So you can see that this is quite full now, and if you would like yours a little bit less puffy than this, feel free to use a bit less, and you can even take a little bit of the rice out if you would like. So now we're ready to sew this opening closed, and we want to continue this 1/4 inch seam allowance that we had around the rest of the pincushion. So you're just going to make sure that this is folded over by about 1/4 inch on both sides of this opening. And then you're going to place those seams together and just tug on this, and I'm going to put a pin through both of these layers, trying to keep everything nice and together as best as I can, and then put a second pin on this other side. So at this stage you're going to be just pushing all that stuffing out of the way while you need to get your needle into this seam. Now my favourite thread to use for sewing up an opening with ladder stitch is this superior bottom line thread. Now this is a really strong polyester thread that is also extremely fine, and the reason I like this for sewing this particular seam, the scissors are getting very blunt, shame. The reason I like this is because I really want my stitches to be invisible here, and so if you are going to use a normal polyester thread, you are fine doing that, but it's just you can't pull on that quite as hard as you can stress this. So then I'm going to put my needle inside this opening here, and I'm just going to bring it up right where I can see one of these stitches through one layer of this fabric. I'm going to try and get in underneath that seam. There we go. So now I'm in underneath that layer of fabric in there, and I'm coming out right where I can see that stitch. I'm going to bring my needle out. If you've got any stuffing starting to poke out, just give Give that a poke back in with your scissors. Now I'm going to be showing you this, and I'm left-handed, so you're going to be probably doing this from the other way around. And if you are left-handed, well, you can enjoy watching the way it will look for you. So now I've got my thread coming out of my top, and I'm going to bring it in to the bottom layer of fabric, and I'm just going to pick up just a little tiny bit of fabric along here, pretty much right on the edge of that fold line that we have there, and I'm going to pick up just a small amount and bring that through, and then I'm going to go directly above where that thread is coming out into the fabric layer above that, and I'm going to pick up the same amount of fabric across that one, bring my needle back out, and then directly below that I'm going to go back into that bottom fabric and pick out the same width of fabric. So the idea here is that if you are able to stitch directly vertical, so from top to bottom and bottom to top, and also pick up the same amount of fabric on both sides, you are going to have a really lovely drawing that will largely become invisible once you've finished. So now I'm coming up to the very end where my stitches began, and just going to bring my needle up basically at the base where this machine sewn part starts. I'm going to put my needle back in to the other side, and just bring it out a little bit further on. Then I'm going to tie a couple of knots here, just up against the fabric, and then I'm going to thread it back down into that stitch and bring it out, and then just give that a bit of a pop and just get that knot buried. You can give your pincushion a really good massage here and just make sure that everything's where you want it to be. But that as itself is already looking like a really cute pincushion. So now I'm going to thread my needle just with a normal sewing thread that you would stitch all of these seams with, and you can pick one that's going to blend in quite nicely if you like. And just grab your ruler and your fabric pen, and we're going to mark a line from corner to corner across each of these edges here, just to give you a guide to stitch along. So you see that there, and then just move it along on the short side here, matching up corners, and do that on all four sides on the top, and then flip it over and do the same for all four sides on the bottom. So just thread your needle with a good length of thread. I'm probably using about 40 centimeters here. Just going to tie another knot here, so just wrap it around the needle probably about 3 times and trim that off. Now you're just going to pick any of the edges here, and we're going to start by coming in inside this seam here. So we're going to do our best to come in between these stitches. So this is where our wonderful reinforcing is going to make things a bit hard, because we should have covered up any of these openings fairly well. Anyway, so do your best to bring your needle in through one of these side seams, and we're going to pinch this edge right on that line. We're going to bring the needle up about 1/8 of an inch, or even probably more of a 1/16 of an inch away from that line. Pull your thread through and give it a little pop till you hear that knot go inside. And then we're going to go through both layers here with that line directly in the middle, and we're going to make a stitch. And now we're just going to do a running stitch where we go backwards and forwards, up and down along this line. And I'm only taking probably a bit over 1/8 of an inch length for my stitches here. You can choose what you would like to do. You can have a go at making them quite big and chunky if you would like. And just keep checking top and bottom that you're getting things coming out the way you want. Now, as we near the corner on the other side, I'm just going to keep going, doing my best to keep my stitches nice and straight and even. So I'm pretty much at that corner now. Now I'm going to give all these stitches a little bit of a tug, because part of the charm of making one of these is that you want it's all a little bit puckered and uneven. So don't tie off yet. You're going to now pinch this corner, so just make sure that none of that rice is sort of in the way. Just feel with your fingers and wiggle it. And then we're going to pinch that corner, and I haven't ruled a line or anything on this, but you should be able to just eyeball this because it's just a little short seam. And we're going to do the same thing and go backwards and forwards across both layers of this. Okay, now we've reached this other corner, and you're just going to continue stitching across here and down this edge. Done one whole side, and you'll have a quarter of it done. So now I've got both of these ends stitched, and you can already see this is starting to look really, really cute. Now, as we come up to the corner on the other side, you'll see that it's already stitched across the end here because we've already stitched around this section. So rather than finish your thread and cutting it, you can just thread it back in to one side and just tie a knot, and then we're going to push this back down into that same stitch and push it right through the pin cushion and just come out again where we want to pick up again along this other line. So just right in that corner, give that bit of a pull and hear that knot pop through, and we're going to stitch our way along. Now the very last part of this pincushion is where we're going to add the tufting that goes right through the top and bottom. So you're going to mark on the top of your pincushion, so center your ruler over that center cross where the four patch meets on here, and you're going to mark in the corners of a 2 inch by 1 1/4 inch box. So just mark a dot in each of these corners. So the box is 2 inches long by 1 1/4 inches wide, and you're going to repeat that on the other side. Now this is where I recommend that you get a really thick thread for this part where we do the tufting, because we don't want this pulling through the layers of the fabric, and this is what can happen if you're going to use a very fine thread that can actually split through the fibres and pull through and make quite a large hole. And you're also going to need a nice long needle that's going to go through all the layers of thickness. Now you're going to pick one of these to be your bottom and one of these to be the top, and whichever one you pick to be the base, that's where you're going to start. And you're going to come in not exactly on top of this dot, but very, very close next to it, and you're going to push your needle right through both layers here, and you're going to come up very close to the dot that you've marked here. And the aim of what we're going to do here is, rather than stitching exactly on the same spot, which will actually mean that the thread will end up pulling through all the layers, we're going to stitch a little X shape on the top and the bottom, like a little cross stitch, and this is going to just move out that stress of that thread pulling on there. So I've just popped the knot up through into those layers now, and now I can start pulling this tightly. So that's the first arm of my X. I'm going to make another stitch about 1/8 of an inch away and come up on the top near that dot and finish the X shape on this side. Now I'm pinching with my thumb and finger here, top and bottom, to make this form the dimple, and I'm making sure that this is coming out when I go through exactly where I want it, and I'm pulling that tightly. Now you can go around several times through the layers. Okay, so now I'm going to tie that off tightly up against the fabric, and I'll do a double knot, and then I'll push that back through all of the layers. It doesn't have to come out in the same spot here. Tug on that until I hear it pop, and then just trim that off, and those threads will go back down inside of there. So now you can see this is starting to come together. We've just got these other 2 dimples to stitch here. And now we have a beautiful box tufted pin cushion called the PinPod. Congratulations on finishing along with me, and I hope that you're going to be able to make many more of these cute little pin cushions.